The 1st Kansas Colored Volunteers were mustered into service for Kansas on August 4th, 1862, and the United States on January 13th, 1863. So what does this mean? Well, the Emancipation Proclamation wasn't issued until January 1st, 1863, which means that going by the date that they were mustered into service for Kansas, that the 1st Kansas was actually the first African American unit to serve during the Civil War. Before Kansas became a free state in January of 1861, it was a politically violent territory. A year after it had become a state, U.S. Senator and General James H. Lane, who was an anti-slavery partisan during the Bleeding Kansas days, was a recruiting commissioner for Kansas, north of the Kansas River. Despite the fact that Lincoln was worried about maintaining Union loyalty in the pro-slavery border states, Lane would violate direct orders from Secretary of War Edwin M. Stanton and create the 1st Regiment, comprised of freed African Americans without federal authorization. Escaped slaves from Arkansas and Missouri would arrive in Kansas, many of them with help from Lane, who would lead liberation raids in Missouri. To circumvent Stanton's wishes, Lane would have the African American recruits enrolled as laborers. On August 4, 1862, Lane would issue an order to raise a full regiment under the command of Captain James M. Williams. While he did it out of abolitionist enlightenment, it was also for political and military expediency. On October 18, 1862, a detachment of 225 soldiers were ordered to proceed to the Bates County, Missouri, to deal with a guerrilla band. With the 5th Kansas Cavalry serving as scouts, the regiments would encamp at the homestead of John Toothman when they would encounter a considerate Confederate force on October 27th, including the Missouri State Guard under Colonel Jeremiah V. Cockrell, and local Confederate locals led by Bill Truman and Dick Hancock. Besieged by the guerrillas, the 1st Kansas would create earthworks that they would nickname Fort Africa in honor of their ancestry on Toothman Farm. After 2 days, the 1st Kansas was drawn out by a divisionary fire set by the Confederates, but several volleys of shots would force the Confederates to withdraw. The Union casualties were minimum, and there's no number of how many Confederates were killed. The skirmish at Island Mound would draw national attention over the next coming days, and it marked the first time an African American unit saw combat during the Civil War. With the Emancipation Proclamation, African Americans became federally sanctioned to fight in the war. The 1st Kansas was officially mustered and split into 6 companies at Fort Scott, Kansas, on January 13, 1863, under Williams, who was now a colonel, being the 4th African American Regiment to officially join. The regiment came at a low point in northern morale, but seeing an African American regiment under the command of a white officer represented practical self-interest as much as racial enlightenment on the part of Union policymakers. African American soldiers, however, were employed disproportionately as laborers and were given unequal and unreliable pay as a result. Despite the skepticism of the Northern whites, the aptitude and bravery of units like the 1st Kansas would drive public opinion to grow to favor African American enlistment. As African American regiments would become more common, the 1st Kansas would see action in Honey Springs, an indigenous territory, on July 1863, where it captured a Texas regiment's flag and drew praise from superior officers. The 1st Kansas would be renamed to the 79th U.S. Colored Infantry on December 13, 1864. Eventually, the memory of the 1st Kansas would be overshadowed by other units such as the 54th Massachusetts Infantry, which is the inspiration to the movie Glory, but it was groundbreaking in both concept and service. Today there is a 40-acre historical site near Butler, Missouri that commemorates the Battle of Island Mound.